Good afternoon, financial professionals. I'm Dan Peterson, President and Managing Partner here at E4 Insurance Services, welcoming you to the BREW, where we build relationships every week. Thanks for tuning in today. For those joining the BREW for the very first time, welcome. We like to start our BREWcast by celebrating today's National Day. This one goes back to my childhood. National Sticky Bun Day. My grandmother and mother had a bread recipe that would make fantastic sticky buns. So enjoy that delicious treat, although it does add a few pounds. It's National Grain-Free Day. I don't know why anyone would want to be grain-free, but maybe if they're gluten tolerant, that would be an issue. And we'd also like to give a nod to a businessman and adventurer, Steve Fawcett. And on February 21st of 1995, Steve became the first person to fly solo across the Pacific Ocean in a hot air balloon. In 2002, he navigated the world and throughout his career set numerous aviation records. This goes to show when you set your mind on a goal, the sky truly is the limit. On today's BREW, Brady Serold and I, Brady is our E4's Senior Vice President, Disability Income. He's was a chief underwriter at one of our carriers and helped build guaranteed issue disability income. So we're pleased to have him on. And he's joining me in our focused planning series case study for February. And if you've been tuning in, that's focused on understanding buy-sell agreements. This case study reviews a business with multiple owners that completed a business valuation as a buy-sell agreement, and we provided recommendations for this business. So we encourage you to use the chat box to raise a hand or ask questions. Also, all the attendees are in a drawing for a CE voucher and a Starbucks gift card, which we will be announcing the winner at the end. So thanks for tuning in, and Brady, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Dan.
How is the weather in Arizona?
It's pretty nice this time of year. This
there
is the
you
time
go.
when people want to be here. July, August, yeah, not so much.
Well, Brady, you joined our team last June, and having left the insurance carrier side and came to this dark side of independent distribution, and we're glad to have you part of the team. This was early on. You and I had a conversation about this case study that we're working on, and we're going to take through, I think, really hopefully build upon what Chad Flanagan had last week when he was sharing the components of a good buy-sell agreement and where some of the differences can come from. So we're going to build on that and actually go through a real-life case and how at E4 we were able to add some value to this. So, and they are multi-generation, third-generation manufacturing company in the Dakotas. And the process that we went through, they had conducted a formal business valuation. They had put their buy-sell agreements together with an attorney. They ultimately took out, they have financing notes where the third generation is buying the company from generation 2. And our role was really identifying life insurance and disability insurance protection liquidity options for the firm. So as Chad talked about last week, we want to reiterate the 3 key points to understanding a buy-sell and buy-sell agreement. And the first is understanding the triggering events. What triggers a buyout of a shareholder's stock? And that can be things like death, divorce, disability, diagnosis, dissolution, other things that can be used in that. And we want to make sure we understand when it's triggered. So those are, as Chad reminded us last week, that's really number 1. Number 2 is we're going to get into the valuation mechanics. Is it the stipulated value, the formula for finding the value? Is it an appraisal completed annually or whatever there is a triggering event? And that can be a key point to remember. And then lastly, the funding mechanism. Do all parties know and agree where the money is coming from? Is life insurance, disability insurance been procured, et cetera? So as we get into that, Chad mentioned that some of these can be openings for litigation, challenges between partners. So it's key to making sure that we have these 3 points reviewed. So the background of this case, Brady, was we have a generation 2 that has really helped build this organization. One brother had 50%, brother 2 and brother 3 had 25% each. They have 3, each of them have a child that's involved, the cousins, and they were looking to transfer the ownership to their children. So how were they going to do this? They're still active, but will be exiting the business in the next few years. So they decided that they would be in a position to hold the notes and have generation 3 buy out generation 2 and keep the business in the family. That was really the goal and objective. So as we go through the 3 items of every buy sell, the first is to look at their buy sell and understand what were the triggers. And Brady, any of these stand out to you? A voluntary or involuntary lifetime transfer, purchase upon divorce. Now that means that the business was going to stay in the family. It wouldn't be distributed as part of a divorce proceeding. The death of a stockholder, we know that's pretty evident. And disability, we'll get into that. Exercise of an option, and then retirement. So all of these were triggers that were identified in the agreement. Any of them stand out to you, Brady?
Obviously, the disability side for me, Dan. But you know, we go back and look at when I looked at the agreement, and we'll talk about a little bit some of the things in there. I was like, this is probably one of the most well-written buy-sell agreements I've seen because it truly addressed it and addressed the language very well for each of these things.
Okay. So the voluntary lifetime transfer is that they have to sell it to each other. That was really, it was going to be held as a closely held company, and they had to offer the shares up to their fellow stockholders before they could do anything outside of the company. The involuntary, which by reason other than the stockholder's death, disability, or voluntary sale, the stock is transferred to another entity. Anything here, Brady, that you want to comment on?
Nothing on this side.
Okay. This really get into dissolution. Divorce, again, this would not be held as an asset that could be awarded, that they were going to stay within the family, and the stock was to be held within the lineal descent. That's fairly,
you know, and that's one. I mean, in our conversation with the 3 cousins, it was pretty clear that they did not want to be in business with any of their spouses, and one of their dads was in the meeting as well. And it was clear that he didn't want any of the daughter-in-laws to be owning the business.
Yeah, it was clear both generations felt the same way, that that was a key thing. So the attorneys did write that into the agreement. Death said that at death, they shall be required to purchase all of the deceased stock for its fair market value. Now, there's a definition there, fair market value. It's subject to Article 3. And the second part of this, Brady, maybe you can jump into, if the stockholder had not completed payment for shares of stock, what are we talking about there?
Well, the Gen 3 had promissory notes to Gen 2, and in the event of death, and we'll see disability in a minute, that is the first liability. So I think it was a 15-year note, and they had to pay their uncles back or dad back before they got any value out of the business. So, if this is their retirement plan for the future, if something were to happen for their own family, they're not number one in line. Their uncles are number one in line.
And so it was key as we get into the funding mechanism, the third point of that we had to take this into consideration, because not only do we have to have liquidity to buy the shareholder stock, we could not purchase the shareholder stock until the promissory notes were paid off. So they had to cover the debt as well as the value of the shares. Would you say that would be accurate in your mind?
Correct.
Okay. And then the disability provision. You want to cover this?
Yeah. I mean, it's very well worded. I mean, has the physical or mental, so the two key parts from a definition standpoint. They have permanent disability, meaning after 365 days, they are out of permanent disability. Again, and it says that same stipulation at the bottom. The note has to be paid first, and then they have the shares, and then they execute the buyout of those shares. So again, it has that same liability on the life side as the disability side.
So for the financial advisors we have on the call today, Brady, when you read this language and an advisor brings to you a buy-sell agreement, I love how you handle it. You ask a very key question, and you did this to me as we reviewed that. Why don't you share a little bit of what your insight is there?
Yeah, I mean, again, you have funding is one thing of it. Again, and funding comes down to cost. I mean, it always comes down to cost. Disability buy-sell is a little bit more expensive than, for dollar than term life insurance. But that's not the key part of it. Yes, the liquidity is nice to have, but really is who's making the determination that they're disabled? Again, am I making that determination and Dan's my partner? Dan thinks he can come into work just fine. If I don't think Dan can pull his weight and he's just basically coming in to talk to the staff and sit around and go into the lunchroom, and he thinks that's working versus I'm picking up his slack, who is to determine it? Well, are you going to go to court? So that's where, in my opinion, that's where the insurance company, you have an independent person make that determination based on the definitions in that insurance contract, which happen to match up with the definitions in the buy-sell agreement.
The second thing you asked me was, okay, if they have to, and this was both for death as well as disability, if they have to pay the note off and then pay for the shares of stock from the disabled stockholder, where's the money going to come from?
Yep.
That was a key question for the Generation 3 and Generation 2, because it was their notes that had to be paid off, their promissory notes, which was part of their retirement.
Yep. And you said is Gen 3, they're working their butts off, and they're taking reasonable salaries, but not getting any distributions, because they're putting all distributions in the company back to pay off Gen 2. So they're taking basic salaries and all distributions are flowing over. So they're putting in the sweat equity that their uncles and dad have put in, and then their grandfathers put into the business. And now, they're I guess light at the end of the tunnel is when they pay off Gen 2, and now they own, maybe at that time, $15-18 million business.
This was just another exercise that the company had the right to exercise an option, and upon retirement, obtaining the age of 70, there was a trigger that they should be required to retire, and that was part of the agreement and purchase of their stock at fair market value. So what are the valuation mechanics? Remember, Chad talked about number 2, the valuation. Was it stipulated formula, book value, appraisal value, what are the valuation mechanics? Well, as we reviewed the agreement, they had done a certified valuation with Eide Bailly. They did the formal business valuation. The value of the company was determined to be $13,750,000. With that assumed, and remember Chad talked about this, Brady, the fair market value of the controlling interest of common stock. This can be a point of litigation if it's not clearly understood by all parties. So the stock value was utilized. They split the value into voting shares and non-voting shares. And you'll see that in the valuation of the non-voting shares of stock, as we talked about last week, that shall be the fair market value of the stock on the day of any triggering event. So as we look at this, as we look at the valuation mechanic, it's triggering on the date of a triggering event. So that would mean if 365 days of disability have occurred, that's the valuation triggering event. If death occurs, that's the date of the triggering event, and that's when the valuation would have to be done. And you'll notice that they very specifically had language in here that says the fair market value will be determined under the same methods as you would use for determining federal estate tax value of the stock. So when we look at that, the federal estate tax would take into consideration a valuation, but then a lack of marketability. And they literally describe that in the agreement, that they're going to do a valuation, qualified business valuation by their CPA firm, or if such firm does not undertake business valuation, so if they went to a CPA firm that didn't do valuations, they name the business valuator or a company that would perform business valuations for businesses similar to this manufacturing company. So they actually spell that valuation mechanic out. And I thought this was really interesting that they did have language in here that basically said the stock value per share to be used is under this agreement shall not reflect any control premium, but shall reflect a minority and lack of marketability discount. So that was of 30%. So if you don't have a majority share, then your purchase price is reduced for lack of marketability. So the trigger event happens. They're actually saying that those that have majority ownership get the full value, whereas the minority interest, but it is spelled out in the agreement, Brady. You would agree that that language is there.
It is, as I mentioned before, this is a very, very well-written buy-sell agreement.
So one of the things Chad said that interpretation and that people did, when we look at this actual agreement, we can actually see that language there, and it was very clear what the intent in the agreement that everyone executed was. And then we're going to get into the funding mechanism. So this is where we have the opportunity to come in with solutions and provide solutions both on the life insurance and the disability income side. And that's exactly what we did. We had already done the insurance on Gen 2 and put coverage in place. We converted some term insurance, got permanent insurance in place with long-term care riders. But
hey,
after
Dan, on your comment, because I know when I took a look at what you did in Gen 2, which is, I think you go to the importance of convertibility of the term that you're buying, because one of those Gen 2 owners is not insurable, and it was a big part having the convertibility in his term insurance to be able to provide that benefit for the company.
Absolutely, that was a key piece to keep that. And he was the 50% owner as well. So if we did not have conversion options, we would have really been struggling to come up with liquidity that's needed for repayment. After the note was taken out, the promissory notes, as we brought out already, the notes have to be paid first and then the shares bought out. So this creates quite a liquidity event that's needed. So on the Generation 3, we placed $7.5 million of life insurance coverage, $2.5 million of it permanent, $5 million of it, and the $2.5 million permanent also had a return of premium feature. It also had the ability for chronic illness to access the death benefit. And then we had $5 million of convertible term insurance that was placed on each of the Gen 3 owners. Brady, there was a little bit of an underwriting challenge, but for life insurance, we were able to get through that. As you looked at the file, the medical files, the disability was a little tougher.
Correct.
We reviewed the buy-sell and dialed in on which the disability. We previously showed them that they had a gap here. They did not have any disability income. And so that was the new part of the conversation. And I want to get to the solution itself, the funding, and how we were able to get there. So we did Generation 3, and then we also did the coverage on Generation 2. So we had both of those on the life insurance. This gets into the quarterly installments. We'll skip over this. But part of the agreement said that it gave permission for the company also to apply for and own additional insurance on the disability of each stockholder in amounts that they shall deem reasonable in order to ease the purchase of the stock under this agreement. So this was a good piece of this agreement that basically we could point to the company and say, your agreement gives the company the right to purchase this and own this insurance. This is part of what was anticipated as the funding. I'm going to let you walk through the disability piece, because this was based on underwriting. You came up with some unique solutions that I think advisors need to be aware of, the skills that you bring to the table.
Yeah, again, I'll point out this. I made that comment before regarding the disability. I mean, really, it is, where's the money coming from and who's making the determination? Again, so, it talks about buyout and the definition, and it was very clearly defined. You can skip to the next one. So again, in this one, after a 365-day elimination period, an objective party, which is the insurance company, not my partners. We don't have to go to an attorney, anything. The insurance company makes that determination whether an owner is totally disabled or not. Again, and what you do is it provides the source. Now, in this case, we used a lump sum benefit, but you could do lump sum, you could do monthly payout. Most of the time, I make the recommendation of lump sum because that's basically turning over the keys and a down payment on your buyout liability. So we took it out to the carriers, and as Dan mentioned, I mean, that's one nice thing here at E4 is we do the pre-underwriting. So we have access to the files, and when I had taken a look at the buy-sell agreement, I said, Dan, what are you going to do here? And he was like, I haven't talked to him about that. Let's take a look at the files. So I went in and looked at the medical records, and the buy-sell is a little bit more liberal than personal underwriting, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, there were a few little health challenges that caused the extra premium rating here. But essentially, we came out with a 1.5 million lump sum in the event of a total disability. And at the ages of these owners, I mean, we're talking about peanuts. Now these are guaranteed premiums, so you're looking at $1,000 a year to reinsure $4.5 million of liability. Extremely affordable. Obviously, the higher the premium go, or the older the person gets, the higher the premium is. Also, occupation class can do that, but these individuals are in management capacity. And then we obviously have the ability to have a discount because we had 3 owners applying at the same time. So again, for a relatively low cost, they looked at it, and $1,000 a year to cover $1.5 million on a note each. It was a no-brainer.
But there was also the challenge that if they got bought out, the note gets paid off, they get shares of stock, they've lost their personal income as well.
Correct. And we looked at it and we said, hey, what are you going to do? You know, I mean, you're 25 and 29 and 33 years old. What are you going to do? Income continuing, you know, the value of the company, that money goes pretty quick. You know, again, what's the value of that money, and are you going to get it all at once? You know, would you like to have a paycheck continued, you know, paid for by the company to make sure your wages are continued, but not affect the corporate bottom line? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. Now they did have a short-term disability plan, but provided nothing long-term. And again, it's a manufacturing company, so long-term disability can get kind of squirrely in the world. And they were like, no, short-term is good for our rank and file employees. So we came in and said, okay, you have a couple options. The first option is fully underwritten. And, you know, and I think if you click it, it'll show the analysis part, Dan. So one of them, he was approved just as applied for. I mean, when I looked at the medical records, I'm like, no issues. One of them, he had some concerns in there, and there were notations in the medical records that, you know, I'm not saying he would have been declined, but is that really a path we want to go down? And then the other one, due to some build and lab issues, he would have been also rated a probable exclusion rider, as well as a limited benefit period to 5 years. So when I looked at the numbers, you know, just kind of, hey, if we quoted them on an individual basis, now mind you, two of them aren't getting a policy to age 67, as well as kind of getting beat up and not having everything covered. You know, they could have gone that route. But so what we ended up doing was making a suggestion to do a guarantee issue carve out. Again, we were able to do 60% to $5,000 a month, and we were able to put in the catastrophic rider. Again, the life insurance had chronic and terminal illness in it, but now if they were to suffer 2 of the 6 activities of daily living and or a severe cognitive impairment, they would have 100% of their income tax free till age 67. I mean, what a solid income replacement plan for, you know, an owner of a company. Now, we did have to add 2 additional key employees. Again, you know, this is a small town in the Dakotas. You know, can you get a new controller to move to that small town? I don't know. I mean, again, they have valuable employees, so we brought 2 people in. Now, Gen 2 did make a comment. He goes, well, why do we have to give them that benefit? I just kind of laughed, and like that, we had talked to Gen 2 about Gen 3 about the health issues, but Gen 2 didn't know all the health issues. And, you know, once we brought that to light and to show them that, hey, all 3 cousins are going to get a policy to age 67 as applied for to cover 60% of their income up to $5,000 a month. So at 100,000 earnings, they're at 60%. Census enrollment, so we're not asking any medical questions. 1 day actively at work, and they have this coverage. And this is individual coverage, non-cancelable, guaranteed renewable, all the benefits and bells and whistles of an individual plan. So again, for $600 a month, they get to have exactly what they could purchase on the street if they were 100% healthy. That's the key word, if they were 100% healthy. And the 2 individuals they added, they get to write that off as a benefit expense, which if you look at the premium, it's half the premium. So you goodwill for 2 key employees to keep them and retain them, because what do we talk about? We want to attract and retain valuable employees. That's part of, you know, our, what we do here at E4. So they get to do it, but it's at the benefit of the 3 Gen 3 owners to add those 2 people. So it's kind of, you know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone there, Dan.
Yeah, the deductible expense from the company for the Gen 3 owners, not just providing liquidity to assist with a buyout if that total disability happened, provide liquidity for the note, but also to protect their income. So when that funding mechanism happened, this was really a comprehensive plan. And I think the key is a lot of times as advisors, it's easy to focus in, and the point we're trying to make here, it's really easy to focus in on a life insurance component. Many times, the next provision in a buy-sell agreement is the disability trigger. And many times as advisors, I know in my career, I was guilty of this. You gloss right over it because really what options exist. And one of the things that we're really showing at E4 Insurance Services is that there are excellent opportunities to have that next discussion about the buyout trigger for disability. So this was a great solution. If you want to talk about the policy, you defined a class, obviously. So if they have new management coming in, there's a guaranteed issue option for the new management as well. And we assist with the ongoing administration of this for our advisors.
Yep. As income goes up, their benefits go up in accordance to the plan. Again, it's all still guaranteed. And so it looks and smells like group, but it's truly an individual plan. I think that's the part when we're working together, Dan, is, and you talk about the disability and people overlook it. And I think partially because it's quoted incorrectly, in my opinion, and because most of the time they come in and are looking for a similar benefit as the life insurance side, and they look at that premium and they choke and they don't know how to pivot. So really it comes down to, did they need somebody independent and objective to make the claim determination? I think the answer is yes. Then what amount of funding can they afford, and do they want to put towards this liability? And then that just becomes a risk transfer. Again, the biggest piece is making the determination and use that funds as down payment. And then however the business determines they want to pay out over whatever period of time, they need to decide that amongst the partners.
Well, I think this really shows that we were working with the financial advisor who had this company, Gen 2 and Gen 3, as the money manager, financial advisor, bringing us in, having us assist on this. We were able to really identify through the process of understanding the agreement, what are the triggers, how is it valued, where's the money going to come from, and what's the funding mechanisms available. This was really a win-win win for everyone involved, and some really great solutions that came out of it. We have opening for questions if there is any. You can use the chat. But Brady, we're also having a drawing, so I need you to pick a number between 1 and 27.
Yeah, let's do 4, Dan, because we were 4 under yesterday and our member guest.
Well, we weren't, but you were. That was good. Number 4, who is it? Lenora Pella, today's winner. Congratulations, Lenora. We'll be in touch with your Starbucks gift card as well as your CE certificate. So congratulations. Well, Brady, I hope this case study will spur people to provide us with copies of buy-sell agreements so that we can assist in reviewing, understanding the triggers, understanding the valuation methodology, and then also looking at funding options, and then going beyond that and discussing, well, this is great, you're bought out, you have your shares paid for, but what are you going to do the rest of your income, and just some natural pivots and personal insurance planning that was able to be done on a guaranteed issue basis. So really good stuff. Thank you for your leadership on this, and thank you for your time. Everyone, next week, BREW, we have Mason McKinney with Principal Life. He joins us to discuss generating business and marketing insurance opportunities with buy-sell agreements. So we'll continue our focus the last week of the month on buy-sell agreements. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week on the BREW.